Hey, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Quarbit, your host today for Quarbit Universalis 4, and I hope you're all having a great day being world conquerors. Today we'll begin our journey into covering the trade mechanics in EU4, which is, to be frank, a really daunting task. Nothing's made me want to stop taking suggestions quite like this one. Wow. The trade mechanics in EU4 are some of the most confusing aspects of the game, which most people don't entirely understand, and, although most players have a pretty decent grasp as to how it works, let's be honest with ourselves, we're all pretty much equally ignorant here. After taking a long look at the numbers though, it's actually a lot simpler than you think. Comparing before and after learning about the trade mechanics, I can safely say that very few of my strategies are going to be changing. What we're talking about today is mostly just crunching a ton of numbers and seeing how the different stats in trade affect your income. So, if you don't really like to look at numbers and all that stuff, then it's probably not the best video for you. Just to show you what effective trade can really achieve, here is a showcase of pretty much maximum efficiency. Not like, the trade efficiency stat, but, good strategy and stuff like that. As you can see from my Dutch Global Empire game from a while ago, I was making literally over 1,000 ducats a month from trade before even hitting the 1700s. Needless to say, there is no need for all this at all, like even slightly. But it's great for World Conquest because the merc spam becomes quite disgusting. Anyway, let's begin with the basics. Here are your trade nodes. As you can tell, there are quite a lot of them. The most important thing to recognize is their roles and interactions between each other. So essentially, every single node except for 3 transfers to another node. This is what we refer to as downstream. When a node is downstream from another, it means they receive trade from that node, indicated by the long curvy arrows between them. For example, we say the English Channel is downstream from Chesapeake Bay. Similarly, you could also say that the Chesapeake Bay is upstream from the English Channel. The 3 nodes that aren't upstream from any nodes are Genoa, Venice, and the English Channel, referred to as end nodes. This means that they retain 100% of the trade that flows into them, making them the absolute best trade nodes in the game to put your trading capital in. By default, the trading capital is the node of your capital, but you can move it for 200 Diplo to another province just as a tip. The nodes that aren't downstream from any nodes are the Amazonas, Australia, California, Quillaba, Great Lakes, Hudson's Bay, Capsina, Lhasa, Patagonia, and Rio Grande. These nodes aren't particularly special, they're just kinda bad, not gonna lie. There's also a difference between inland nodes and coastal nodes. A node is defined as inland by this symbol and when it doesn't have any coastal provinces in it. By steering from or to or collecting from an inland node, you get something called Caravan Power. Caravan Power is calculated by development divided by 3 with a max of 50%. Caravan Power just gives you an extra trade bonus to inland nodes, so it's nothing super special, and you probably never really noticed it was there in the first place. So that covers the really basics of trade nodes, and we'll be delving much deeper into that later on. So, the most important question to ask is, where does all the money come from? Well, the simple answer, it is going to be trade goods. The advanced answer? Oh boy, you better get strapped in for this one. It's a combination of the price of a trade good in a province multiplied by the amount of goods produced to create that trade value. The price can fluctuate based on global events usually, and when it comes to producing more goods, it's based on the Diplo development plus 1, and then modified by goods produced modifier. Trade value is essentially the stuff you have ready in boxes to ship off to people. We'll be talking about 4 things today, and it's best for you to get some of this written down or memorized or something. 1, we'll be getting into a lot more detail later in a different video when we talk about merchants. Right now we're going to be talking about trade value, which is tied to trade goods. Next is trade power and trade steering, which also ties back into trade nodes and merchants. Got it? Good. For simplicity's sake, I'll be referring to all of them by the first letter of their second words. So, P is power, S is steering, V is value. So, as I was saying, V is how valuable everything in your node is. You can see this in your node tab as the value of local trade. It's an accumulation of every piece of V in this node. Next, let's talk about trade power, or P. Nations use P to compete in manipulating the flow of V in several ways. The absolute amount of P is pretty much unimportant. What is important though is the relative proportion of P wielded by a country and others it is cooperating with compared to all countries it is competing with. To put that into more coherent English, P is how much you own of the V in any node you own. This is easy to understand when you look at the pie chart provided under the Node tab. The multicolored wheel is a reference for the percentage of total P in the node. For example, let's say Nation A has 40p, while Nation B has 20p, and they're the only 2 nations in a certain node. Nation A has 66% of the P in the node, Whether it's 400p versus 200p doesn't really matter, it's still 66%. So, A still gets 66% of the value in the node when they collect. Now let's introduce some modifiers while we're in this simple scenario. If both A and B are collecting from their home node, then there's no penalty. But if A or B are collecting in that node and it isn't their home node, they'll suffer an instant 50% penalty for all P they have in that node. When looking at the formula for collecting money, you can see that this kind of sucks a little bit. Once the money is collected though, it's then multiplied by 1 plus the percentage of trade efficiency in the nation before added to their coffers. That hypothetical situation was only for a completely isolated node with none around it though, so here's the P/V transfer stuff I already know I'm gonna hate before it's even scripted. Okay, so transferring trade kind of goes like this. Everyone who's collecting is fighting to keep their V. Even if they don't share equally, everyone who's collecting there still wants it to stay in that node. They're fighting against everyone who wants to take that V away. Every nation who's transferring wants to take V from that node into the next one, so they work together. If there are two options to transfer to, merchants come into play for the nation to choose where they want to use their trade power for steering towards. So let's say really simply that nation A and B are in Hudson's Bay for whatever reason. Just ignore colonial nations for now. Hudson's Bay only transfers to one place, Gulf of St. Lawrence. If nation C and D are in St. Lawrence and want that trade, they'll be fighting nation A and B for it. Let's say each nation has 20 P in Hudson's Bay. Nations A and B, collectors, make up 50% of the total P, while C and D, the transfers, also make up 50% of the total P in that node. Therefore, 50% of the V in that node will be transferred, and 50% will be kept. This is mostly why, as I mentioned earlier, collecting in starter nodes is kind of trash, since all your value gets stolen. When that 50% reaches St. Lawrence, it gets added to the total V as incoming and gets shared among the collectors from that node according to their respective P values in their collecting node, which are C and D. So, as a semi-working example, 20 ducats are in Hudson's Bay and 10 are in St. Lawrence. A and B now collect 5 ducats a month in trade income. Let's pretend C has 10p in St. Lawrence while D has 20. 10 ducats head over to St. Lawrence. St. Lawrence, now with 20 ducats of value, divides that among C and D. D, with 20p in that node, now collects 66% of the V in St. Lawrence, and of the V transferred from Hudson's Bay. So, around 13.33 ducats in total. If it was a full EU4 game, that V would be collected into a total amount, which could also then be subject to being transferred even further downstream. I hope that makes some kind of sense as to how trade income can become so overwhelming even when your node is initially pretty impoverished. Though we're not even into all the modifiers which can make massive changes to amount steered and where it goes. We just covered what happens with only one available node to transfer to. So what happens if your scenario is something similar to, say, Tunis's? In fact, that's the next example I'll be using. For simplicity's sake, all the numbers will be made up, and we're going to pretend that Tunis isn't getting any money while trade is being moved towards Sevilla and Genoa. In this situation, it's very much up to the nations in each trade node. So let's say nation A is in Sevilla, B is in Genoa, and C and D are in Tunis. The regular rules still apply when it comes to P having the influence over what amount of V stays in the node or is pulled through. But there are a few differences. For instance, if neither nation A or B are steering trade with a merchant, then trade value leaving the node is split evenly between going to Sevilla or Genoa. But, say nation A in Sevilla is steering with a merchant while nation B in Genoa is not, then all outgoing V goes to Sevilla, even though some of it owns to a nation in Genoa. To put it into simpler terms, all nations steering towards a certain node cooperate with each other and compete with nations trying to steer towards another node. However, this only works with using merchants. So, if we temporarily add nation E to Sevilla, if he uses a merchant along with nation A, then the total P affecting how much V flows towards Sevilla is increased, even if nation B in Genoa is using a merchant to steer trade. Hopefully that makes some sort of sense. I know it's all a little bit confusing, but if you give it a few minutes to sink in, and you'll get it, I'm sure. Maybe you'll want to rewatch that part a little bit a couple of times, just to make sure you got it down pat. Oh yeah, let's not forget about trade steering. I get that this video is already pretty compact with things, but it's important that we cover this as well. So, trade steering is that little hidden mechanic when it comes to getting the most value out of a transferring node. Trade steering is applied as a percentage multiplier for how much more V your nation personally pulls out using its P. So let's run by some numbers and remove nation E from the equation. We'll be going by the basic scenario once again. Each trade node has 20 ducats of V. Each nation has 10p in Tunis, making our numbers easy. By default, Sevilla and Genoa are getting 5 ducats of V from Tunis. However, let's say that nation A has a trade steering value of 100. Nothing happens to the collecting nations, but it's the main value that makes sure that you're the one getting the lion's share of the V going out of the node. So, A would be getting an effective 40p pressure out of the Tunis node despite only having 20 actual p in the node. This means that they can pull 2/3 of the outgoing V towards Sevilla. So that was part 1 of my 2-part trade guide series. Next time we'll be talking about transferring traders downstream, trade companies, mercantilism, embargoes, privateering, protecting trade, and most importantly, merchants. So stay tuned for when I get that out in like, I don't know, a month or something. I hope you all understand why this took literal weeks to work on, since, to be fair, I had pretty much no idea what was going on when I started my research. Anyways, are there any things I missed out in the first half? If there are, just leave a question as a comment and I'll do my best to answer them. If you enjoyed today's video, of course dropping a thumbs up would be super appreciated. And if you're looking forward to the next part, don't forget to hit the shiny red subscribe button and click the notification bell to maybe get notified when it comes in. Yeah, I really don't know how it works anymore, so we'll see if that actually works out in the end. But anyway, this is Quarbit signing off, and as always, have a fantastic day.